Tonight, the founder of collapsed cryptocurrency exchange FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, remains in a jail cell in the Bahamas as he waits for extradition to the United States and the possibility of spending decades behind bars. But what about his parents? I'm surprised so few are asking whether either of them could be in legal jeopardy.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Market Empire, where you can get daily updates on the entire cryptocurrency market. 8 criminal counts, including conspiracy and fraud, have been brought against Sam Bankman-Fried, the creator of FTX. The CEO of Alameda and Sam Bankman-Fried's ex-girlfriend Caroline Ellison is the next person to face charges.
Use very little math. Use a lot of elementary school math. I think every week or so, something weirder than the previous week would happen. For me, a lot of it was just about sort of readjusting my expectations and being open to whatever happened. Trying to think of a good example of a trade where I've lost a ton of money.
Before Caroline took over, Sam Trubacco served as Alameda's previous CEO.
To be clear, I work for Alameda, not FTX. FTX, they're both founded by Sam Bankman-Fried, but yeah, they're completely different. There's a quite robust Chinese wall between the two, so I have no access to what the decision-making process is for FTX.
Sam Bankman-Fried's devoted parents, Barbara and Joe, are reportedly also associated with the FTX group.
Prosecutors involved in the investigation of bankrupt cryptocurrency firm FTX are now looking into the parents of former CEO Sam Bankman-Fried. It's over their alleged involvement in the disappearance of the equivalent to $12 billion in customer funds.
People like Caroline Ellison being charged with the FTX fraud looks quite possible in my opinion. Will SBF's parents face charges? We should probably first get to know Barbara Fried and Joe Bankman a little better before you respond to my question about whether you believe they will be charged.
Fried's father, Joseph Bankman, works as a tax law professor at Stanford, though he's announced he won't be teaching at the university next year. The father, Bankman, worked for FTX for almost a year. Deeply involved in the business in its early days, he helped the company recruit its first lawyers. Last year, he joined the FTX staff in meetings on Capitol Hill. He consulted FTX employees on tax matters and also had a large focus on FTX's charitable operations. His mom, Barbara Fried, retired from teaching at Stanford, was the head of a political advocacy network called Mind the Gap, which she helped start to support Democratic campaigns and causes. Her son was among the donors for the network. Meanwhile, Bankman-Fried and his parents together bought real estate in the Bahamas worth $121 million. Now, Bankman-Fried has maintained in an interview with the New York Times that his parents, quote, weren't involved in any of the relevant parts of the business, such as the balances or risk management. Both parents have remained in the Bahamas, and it has been reported they have told their friends their son's legal bills will likely wipe them out. But putting aside their son's legal bills, what about them, particularly the dad? Could he be charged with any crimes?
It's true that SBF's parents have been closely associated with the FTX organization for years, not just recently, when the FTX became public, but for years before that as well. For instance, venture capitalist Katie Han attended Stanford with SBF's parents, who also facilitated their joint investing. SBF's parents taught Katie Han all she learned when she was a baby.
Your story is really interesting to me, and we were talking about this a little bit backstage. So, Katie actually went to the Stanford Law School and studied with Sam's mother.
And father.
And father. So,
they taught me what I knew
but they had
about
actually never met in person until just now.
Well, for a couple decades.
Right.
Since Sam might be the first person in crypto I ever met.
She knew Sam when he was a little kid.
In 2021, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, revealed his role in FTX and said that one of the first things that drew him to the company was SBF's parents' compliance lawyers.
I have to disclose, I'm a paid spokesperson to FTX and a shareholder there too, because we mentioned them, and big advocate for Sam because he has 2 parents that are compliance lawyers. If there's ever a place I could be that I'm not going to get in trouble, it's going to be at FTX.
By the way, pay attention to Joe Bankman as his father discusses how Peter Thiel, the creator of PayPal, was one of the great personalities he crossed paths with and who even taught at Stanford. Here, he discusses how he was able to assist Peter in paying less tax.
In business, I've had people like Peter Thiel, I suppose probably the best known student. I think I can reveal he once told me that my class was his most valuable because he was able to put a lot of his PayPal stock in an IRA.
At least from what I can see, Joe Bankman played a significant role in FTX. But let's be certain before we indict anyone. Why don't you ask John J. Ray, the current FTX CEO in charge of the bankruptcy cleanup? Recently, something occurred. Listen to John J. Ray and the congressman discuss how SBF would bring his dad to meetings and surely hire his parents.
Is there any evidence of his parents' involvement in the operations?
We're investigating that, as well as any other, players in the
email, Slack, Signal.
It's billions of records. It's a very vibrant environment.
So I hear that you haven't discovered that. I mean, it would seem interesting that that they didn't either give legal advice or business advice or parental advice, maybe?
Well, certainly, clearly, and I think in our first day papers we indicated that Mr. Bankman had given legal advice.
Okay, had he been an employee of FTX, as has been reported?
I don't know if he actually had an employee status, but he certainly received payments from, the family did receive payments.
Okay, that sounds like employment to me. You got a payment for, okay. Well, I raise that because on December 8 of 2021, I met with Sam Bankman-Fried in my office, which I will note was just immediately before he came down to the hearing. He was at least 15 minutes late, and his father accompanied him in that meeting. I asked and focused on what types of regulation he was under, his engagement with regulators, and how that affected FTX.
Not enough people are paying attention to the SBF's family. This is Joe Bankman in 2008 speaking before Congress and the Oversight Committee on Hedge Fund Regulation and what the laws should be to prevent things like fraud. According to SBF's father, Joe Bankman,
I've been asked to provide an overview of hedge fund taxation, focusing on some of the benefits of hedge fund managers. My testimony, however, will also include private equity fund compensation agreements and tax benefits, since they're quite similar. Managers in both these fields receive a management fee, typically set at 2% of the amount under management. They also receive a profits interest, typically set at 20% of the fund's profits. The profits interest is sometimes called a carried interest or simply a carry. The management fee is taxed as ordinary income. The profits interest is taxed as capital gain if and to the extent the fund itself is recognizing capital gain. If it's long-term capital gain, that's at a tax rate of 15% as opposed to the 35% maximum tax rate on ordinary income. In addition, carry is exempt from payroll tax. The way to think about it is to think of the choice our sons and daughters face when they decide upon a career. If they're smart and ambitious, they might become doctors or scientists or lawyers. These occupations and countless other occupations are going to produce income that's taxed at ordinary income rates. Alternatively, they could go into the fund industry and recognize some, and in some cases most, of their income at capital gain rates. That's simply unfair. It violates a common sense maximum that if you have two people earning the same amount, you ought to tax them at the same rate. It's also inefficient. It reduces the size of our economic pie by distorting the career choice our sons and daughters are going to make. It's sometimes argued that hedge fund managers ought to be, and private equity managers ought to be compared to entrepreneurs. As I mentioned in my written testimony, I don't think that comparison is apt. Hedge fund managers are more similar, I think, to investment bankers or to executives at public companies, all of whom recognize income at ordinary income rates.
According to Barbara Fried,
Well, what stands out most is that many of the charges are conspiracies. You can't have a conspiracy with yourself. You have a conspiracy of at least two people. And what I suspect is going to happen is there will be what we call a superseding indictment, where there will be other defendants charged who conspired with the main defendant here, and there'll be additional charges. But the fact that there are numerous conspiracies leads me to believe that this investigation is far from being over.
We believe there's a good likelihood, and we will keep you updated. Join the Market Empire team and subscribe to the channel.